Live from London, you're watching BBC News. In the UK, a series of fatal stabbings leaves 2 students and a school caretaker dead in Nottingham. A 31-year-old man is being questioned.
I'm Yalda Hakim, live in Ukraine. At least 3 people have died following Russian missile strikes in the southern port city of Odessa.
Thousands are expected to gather in Milan for the state funeral of Italy's former Prime Minister, Silvio Berlusconi. And as Iran increases pressure on women who refuse to wear the headscarf hijab, we'll speak to Oscar-nominated actress Shohreh Aghdashloo, who is backing the protesters. Hello, I'm Marianne Mashiri. Welcome to BBC News Now. We start here in the UK, where police in the city of Nottingham are questioning a 31-year-old man on suspicion of murder after 2 students and a man were stabbed to death early on Tuesday. The students were 19-year-olds Barnaby Webber and Grace Kumar. The older man has been named as Ian Coates, a local school caretaker. Well, 3 other people were injured when the attacker allegedly stole Mr. Coates' van and attempted to run them over. One is in a critical condition. Well, let's run through what we know so far. Courtney Bembridge has this update from BBC Verify.
We're starting to build a clearer picture of exactly how this event unfolded. It started at 4 o'clock in the morning here, where 2 students, Grace Kumar and Barnaby Webber, were found dead with stab wounds. An hour later, a man was found dead in a property on Magdala Road, and it's believed that his van was used and driven to a 3rd incident that happened around 30 minutes later, where 3 people who were waiting at a bus stop were run down. 2 of them escaped with minor injuries and 1 remains in hospital. Not long after that, we had the arrest of a 31-year-old man here, and we're going to have a look at that in a bit more detail. That happened at the corner of Bentinck Road and Maple Street, and the van remains there. It's being looked at the moment by forensic police. The 31-year-old man was tasered and detained on suspicion of murder, and this is what we know about him so far. He is 31 years old and originally from West Africa. He's not a British citizen, but he has the right to work and live in the UK under settled status. We also know that he has no criminal record, but there's been some suggestion that he may have a history of mental health issues. So this is what we know so far. As we get more updates, we'll bring them to you.
Courtney Bembridge there at BBC Verify. Well, the UK Home Secretary Suella Braverman made a statement to the House of Commons about the Nottingham attacks a short while ago.
Nottinghamshire police have confirmed that a 31-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after 3 people were killed in Nottingham city centre early on Tuesday morning. The same individual is suspected of stealing a van and then running over another 3 people who are now being treated for their injuries, one of whom remains in critical condition. We know that a knife has been used in these attacks, and 2 of the victims were students at Nottingham University. The 3rd victim was the owner of the van that police suspect was stolen and used to run down those pedestrians. I know that the whole House will join me in expressing our sorrow and that our thoughts and prayers are with the victims' families, friends and all those affected.
Well, my colleague Rajini Vaidyanathan is in Nottingham and she's been speaking to Paul Williams. He's the Bishop of Southwell and Nottingham. He began by reflecting on that vigil held in the city last night.
It was deeply moving. This, as you say, is a city in shock and in collective grief, but carrying and holding in our prayers the family, the friends of those whose lives came to an end tragically and cruelly yesterday, and what happened here at very short notice was just an outpouring of that grief and that shock. Hundreds of young people, students, many of them who knew Grace Kumar and Barnaby Webber as that we now know that these precious lives that were so much a part of this city, many young people who come to this city with hopes and dreams, and those were brought to a cruel end yesterday. And I think what happened here, not just with young people but people across the city, was people were supporting one another and sharing together the extraordinary sense of grief that will not quickly pass. And of course today our prayers are very much focused on those the family and the friends of those who've lost their lives.
It's a difficult time, and any city in the aftermath of something so shocking as this will be going through these stages of grief. What many people we've spoken to here say is even tougher is that we're talking about two of the victims being 19 years old, students in the prime of their life. What kind of support are you able to give to people? We know that there are tens of thousands of students here in Nottingham. This is generally a city that is seen a very safe and welcoming one for students to come and study.
Yeah, it always has been a safe and welcoming and friendly city for students. I believe it will continue to be, but yesterday and today we're in shock. I mean, I think there's no question that anyone who has a care for young people, they're nurturing their aspirations, their hopes and dreams, will have felt the devastation of the cruelty of yesterday, of these young lives so suddenly and so cruelly ended. I have a son who's just finished his first year at university. There'll be many others who've got students in their family. I mean, you can't begin to imagine the extraordinary grief that those families and their friends will be going through. But the students are a part of the city. They're not separate from the city here. And I think already, as we saw in the visual yesterday, we saw people who are part of the city drawing together, surrounding the students, being there to support them. And I think we're going to see that again this afternoon with the vigil at the university, and again tomorrow in the market square. So this is a city that pulls together in hard times. It's always done that. It's a friendly city, and I think we'll see that growing and expanding. And I hope that students who've gone through what is just an extraordinary traumatic time here will know that this is a city that cares for them. We're here to support them, to love them, and of course we're thinking and praying for the family and friends as well of the van driver.
Well, that's Bishop Paul Williams speaking to my colleague Regini Vaidyanathan there. I want to direct you to our live page on this story. If you are about to step away from the television, or if you are on the move, you can access this page by visiting the BBC's website or going to the BBC's news app. You can see that it's just been updated by our Home Affairs correspondent Daniel Sanford. As we scroll back to the top of the page, we can see that he's updated on some CCTV footage which the BBC has seen, which shows a man said to be the suspect for the murder. It shows a man in a black hoodie trying to climb into an open window at a homeless hostel. An arm from inside pushes him away. Another man outside the hostel remonstrates with him, and the suspect then walks off. We're being told that this happened either just before or during the incident on Tuesday morning, but it's important to underline that Nottinghamshire Police haven't yet commented on what we have seen. That's at the top of the live page, but also you can see just there more information on Ian Coates and the other two victims of this terrible tragedy. There you go. That's Daniel Sanford's latest update of the CCTV footage. You can see that on the live page on our website. Now, though, let's take you to Ukraine, where deadly Russian missile strikes have hit the south of the country overnight. Let's cross live to my colleague Yalda Hakim, who is in the capital, Kyiv. Yalda.
Mariam, as you say, another night of airstrikes here across Ukraine. And for the past 16 months, Ukrainians have gotten all too used to the sound of air raid sirens and then finding out where these missiles struck. This time it was in the southern port city of Odessa. Let's just show you some of those images. 3 people are believed to have died. We understand at least 13 others have been left injured. We understand that there was a fire, and you're looking at those pictures now. in a business centre, and a warehouse was also damaged. The city's administration says that air defence systems shot down 2 missiles. Now, while all of this is going on, including the counteroffensive as well, Vladimir Putin, Russia's president, has also been speaking in the last 24 hours, and he has made a very rare admission. He has said that their military is short of some high-precision weaponry. He spoke about drones, he spoke about ammunition. He also criticised Ukraine's counteroffensive and said that they have had heavy losses. So we've heard claim and counterclaim from both sides about the number of losses, but that's Vladimir Putin, Russia's president, criticising the counteroffensive, but also making that rare admission about what they don't have at present. Well, as I said, the Black Sea port of Odessa was targeted overnight. We can now speak to an MP from Odessa. Joining me live from there is Alexei Honcharenko. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program. You were woken up with your family in the early hours of the morning. Just tell me what you heard and saw.
Yeah, hello. Unfortunately, yesterday, by the way, Putin mentioned Odessa in this meeting with so-called military correspondents, and immediately after, in the night, there was just several hours after this event, there was attack on our city. The center of the city was attacked. The explosion was, one of explosions was just 250 meters from my house where I was with my family. So we woke up, it was 2:30 a.m. when it happened. Unfortunately, there were killed people again, and that is completely civilian area. There are universities here, residential buildings. One of the most famous Ukrainian universities, National Polytechnic University of Odessa, is heavily damaged now. So that's one more just brutal terrorist attack of Russia against absolutely civilian, peaceful people.
And just tell us about the situation now. Are emergency workers still working in the area? Have they managed to pull people out from under the rubble?
The rescue operation has finished, and we know that 3 people are killed, more than 20 are wounded. 21 building is damaged near the biggest explosion. 21 building, just imagine, some of them probably will never be recovered. And also there is a supermarket there. There is a center, it's called Interest in Science, where I was taking my children there. And we definitely are shocked but we are not threatened by this. And if Putin thinks that by such attacks, he can destroy our will to struggle, that will never happen.
Of course, Odessa is incredibly strategic. It's virtually the center of this grain deal that was done with Russia as well.
Absolutely. And I think that Odessa today, like yesterday, again, Putin said that he would not go for Kiev anymore. Definitely, we do not believe him. He just can't go to Kiev anymore because of Ukrainian army. Thanks to Ukrainian army and thanks to the Western support. And one more thanks to the United Kingdom for all support we are receiving and for leading this support of the free world. But he again mentioned Odessa, and definitely Odessa is the way to occupied by Russians Transnistria. Odessa is the biggest city on the Black Sea, and Odessa is the heart of the grain deal. And yesterday again, Putin spoke about grain deal, saying that he doesn't want to continue this grain deal. So he wants again as much chaos as possible. And I think that this attack was one of the signs of this too.
Okay, Alexei Honcharenko, MP in Odessa, thank you so much for joining us here on the program.
Thank you very much.
Well, Mariam, thank you. Mariam, as you know, and as we've been reporting, the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, is going to be making a trip to China and then also to London over the next few days from the 16th to the 21st of June. And no doubt the counteroffensive here in Ukraine, the ongoing conflict will be top of the agenda. We will be following all of those developments here on BBC News. But for now, back to you in the studio.
Yalda, thank you very much indeed. Let's take you back to our top story now, and that is those stabbings in the city of Nottingham. I told you a little bit earlier about some CCTV footage that the BBC has seen. Now, it's important to underline that we haven't verified exactly what the circumstances of this footage is, and we only have a still. You can see the press play button, but we only are able to show a still of this. But apparently we believe, the BBC, that this is the triple murder suspect. It shows a man in a black hoodie trying to climb into an open window at a homeless hostel. An arm then pushes him away. Another man outside the hostel remonstrates with him, and the suspect then walks off. We have been told that this happened either just before or even during the incident on very early Tuesday morning. Important again to underline the fact that Nottinghamshire police have not commented on what we have seen, and as I said earlier, we can only show a still image of this footage. But this very interesting footage has come to us at the BBC and has been posted on our live page by Daniel Sanford, our Home Affairs correspondent. I think we can take you there just very briefly to show you exactly where that story is. It's right at the top of that live page. You can get there by going to our website or using the BBC's News app if you are stepping away from the television for a moment, or if you're on the move. All around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News.
Bringing you different stories from across the UK.
7 years after her husband's death, and Sally Oxley is still looking for answers as to how Colour Sergeant Anthony Oxley died. This is the road where Colour Sergeant Oxley had been riding his motorbike on British territory, moments before he was hit by a car driven by an American serviceman. No witnesses were called to the original inquest in Wakefield in February 2018, which recorded a narrative verdict. It found the cause of death were head injuries as a result of a road traffic collision. But it was only last year when details of the incident started to emerge by an unknown source.
This was 6 years after his death that I was handed an envelope in a car park with statements of witnesses that I knew nothing about.
The US Air Force took control of the crash investigation and says it found the serviceman wouldn't face any charges due to the nature of the accident.
For more stories from across the UK, head to the BBC News website.
Hello, I'm Marianne Mashiri. You're live with BBC News Now. Let's go to Italy now, where mourners are gathering in Milan for the state funeral of the former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi, who died on Monday at the age of 86. The billionaire media tycoon was being treated for a lung infection linked to chronic leukemia. Well, a national day of mourning is being held today, the first time for a former Prime Minister. I think we can take you live now to show you what's happening. These are pictures of Arcore, and that, I believe, to be the fact that it's moving slowly, part of the funeral procession. I'm just guessing here, but I'm thinking that's probably why the helicopter camera is following this particular set of cars who are moving very respectfully and slowly. We know that the former Prime Minister is going to be given a state funeral in the Duomo Cathedral in Milan. It's a short drive away from Arcore, where his villa was situated, and it's where his body has been lying since his death a few days ago. Now, of course, the larger-than-life figure was a huge influence on Italian politics for decades and decades, for better or for worse, depending on where your opinion lies. But no one can deny that he was one of the best-known Italian politicians of his time. And yes, I was right. That is the funeral procession. You can see that many people have lined the streets to applaud the former Prime Minister and to watch as his body is driven very slowly towards the Duomo Cathedral in Milan. And of course, as I was saying earlier, he's the first former Prime Minister to be afforded this honour. And today is a national day of mourning for the country. All flags will be flown at half-mast in respect for Silvio Berlusconi. Well, as we watch this cortege moving along towards Milan, we can listen to our correspondent, our Rome correspondent, Sofia Betizia, who is there for us. And Sophia, we're just watching these pictures. We're going to stay with those pictures as we talk to you, actually, of the funeral cortege moving from Arcore, from the villa to Milan. I touched on it a second ago, but just give us an idea, a sense of how important Silvio Berlusconi was for Italian politics and society.
Well, Mariam, he was hugely important, and that's why today the government has declared, as you just mentioned, a national day of mourning, which is unprecedented for a former Italian prime minister. Now, behind me is the Duomo, Milan's cathedral, and in less than an hour, his state funeral with military honours is going to start. And of course, this is going to be a spectacle. There's two huge maxi screens that have been set up here in the main square so that people can watch it live, and there's thousands of people that have been gathered here to pay their respects and to say a final goodbye to Silvio Berlusconi. Now I'm joined by James Imam, who's a journalist based here in Milan, who has been covering politics for a long time. Thanks for joining us, James.
Thank you very much.
So, you know, a character larger than life, somebody who shaped Italian politics. How do you think Silvio Berlusconi is going to be remembered at home and abroad?
Well, inevitably abroad he's going to be remembered for the sort of embarrassing things that he did. That was the sort of thing that the international press was inevitably drawn towards. So his sex scandals, his many trials in court, whether it be for embezzlement, for collaborating with the mafia. It's been very interesting reading the papers here in Italy, because you see that there's a slightly more balanced approach to covering, his life. He has a huge fan base in Italy still, and in the Corriere della Sera, for example, Milan's newspaper, one of the biggest newspapers here in Italy, 34 pages or something were dedicated to his life in yesterday's edition, and it was a bit more balanced. There was a lot of...
Not even the Pope got that coverage when he died.
Not even the Pope got that. The Queen possibly, got a little bit closer to that in the UK at least. And it's just, he's almost strangely a similar figure here. I mean, he was in power for 50 years. And a lot of people really respected him for, being this self-made man that took over AC Milan Football Club, turned it into a great football team, reinvented Italian politics, basically, at a time where you had two main parties, before he sort of came into power. And also for revolutionising the way that media was done in Italy as well. So, I mean, he in Italy leaves a massive legacy that Italians are celebrating a lot of what he did.
And you mentioned politics there. There are big questions being asked about the future of the political party that he created, Forza Italia. Can the party survive without Silvio Berlusconi?
Well, I mean, the big point here is that Berlusconi was really the life and soul of the party, and it's very difficult, for me at least, to imagine the party existing without him at the forefront of it. There are, there's lots of analysis at the moment about whether it might survive, how it might survive, who might take over the party now, to stop those, those likely defections to other right-wing parties, or perhaps to the centre as well. I think it poses a problem for the current Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, because despite the fact that it was a fairly small component of her coalition, it was relatively significant, especially in the Senate, where they really depend on those seats. So will there be a snap election in the future if Forza Italia MPs start to defect to other parties? That's an interesting one to watch.
James Imam, thank you so much. James Imam there with that analysis. Now, Mariam, there you have it. Silvio Berlusconi, a person that defined Italian politics and that was part of society here in Italy for nearly 50 years. Now, as we've been speaking, more people have been gathering here in the main square of Milan, just outside the Duomo, and some people are waving Forza Italia flags, AC Milan flags, which is of course the football team that Berlusconi used to own. They've been clapping. Some of them have been chanting, "Silvio will always be our president." His state funeral starts in less than an hour, and we'll bring you more details throughout the day.
Sophia, thank you very much indeed. And as we say goodbye to Sophia, we'll keep on these pictures because, well, it is a state funeral for a former prime minister in Italy. It's not something that this country has ever seen before for a former prime minister. It's usually, as Sophia mentioned, reserved for war heroes and the like. And it's an absolutely beautiful scene. I mean, just look at that gorgeous square in the heart of Milano, the Duomo Cathedral. And the crowds, as you can see, are gathered outside. We are expecting many people to attend the funeral. We're expecting former ministers from the Berlusconi governments, as well as nearly 40 members of the current government who have confirmed their attendance. The Italian state delegation will be led by the current Italian president, who of course is Sergio Mattarella, and Giorgia Meloni, the current prime minister, and 2 deputy prime ministers will be there too. We're hearing also that the Hungarian head of state, Viktor Orban, is also going to be at the funeral as well. But for the moment, we are seeing the funeral cortege driving slowly and surely towards the cathedral, flanked both at the front and the back by police motorcycles and police cars. And as always, we will try and bring you the very latest live from Milan here on BBC News. So don't go anywhere. Stay with us on the BBC.
Hello. Weather patterns across Europe have not been changing very quickly of late. We've seen a lot of showers and thunderstorms through the Mediterranean, whereas further north high pressure has kept things largely dry. The high still in place to the north for Thursday, but as this quite shallow area of low pressure moves eastwards, it focuses the rainfall further east and actually allows things to dry out quite a lot for Spain and Portugal and for the south of France. So let's take a closer look at some very heavy rain across parts of the Balkans and the southern half of Italy, particularly wet for the Adriatic coast of Croatia and Montenegro. We could see 100 millimetres of rain or more in some places over the next couple of days. So that could well cause some flooding impacts. This is how things look further north across Europe. A lot of dry weather, still some scattered thunderstorms. And then into Friday, our area of heavy rain pushes a little further eastwards, a little further northwards as well. Whereas out towards the west, actually, the weather quite a lot drier than it has been for Spain, Portugal, southern France, and turning warmer as a consequence. 32 degrees there in Madrid, just the odd thunderstorm popping up across high ground in the north of Spain. Now, as we look further ahead, after a prolonged dry spell, there is the increasing chance of rain in London, some slightly lower temperatures as that wet weather arrives. Berlin seeing some downpours at times, and if anything, turning a little bit hotter.
Now showing on BBC Real.
If you look at the style of the construction of the fort, it's a totally ingenious construction, with the walls stretching right up to the edges, the entry gate not at all visible from a great distance. And even after the gate is visible, it's very difficult to deboard from a boat. It has numerous bastions, each with numerous cannons, some of them huge. So that makes it ingenious. That is one of the reasons why it is also an unconquered fort.
Watch more stories like this at bbc.com/real.
You experienced racism. Why didn't you walk away?
That's a really good question.
You're a politician. You read the polls.
I'm not a politician. I don't read the polls.
Yeah, you
I
are
sit
a
in Judiciary
politician.
Committee. No,
you are very definitely a politician.
No.
The very fact that there were not people who looked like you.
Hold on. I'm only halfway through my answer.
Is secret schooling happening across Afghanistan for girls?
It does.
You simply can't assume that.
Actually, yes, you can.
Hard Talk on BBC News.
really don't understand the character of the collision with the iceberg. We don't even know if she hit it along the starboard side, as shown in all the movies. She might have grounded on the iceberg. And this photogrammetry model is one of the first major steps to driving the Titanic story toward evidence-based research and not speculation.
This is BBC News, the latest headlines. In the UK, a series of fatal stabbings leaves 2 students and a school caretaker dead in Nottingham. A 31-year-old man is being questioned. In southwest Ukraine, 3 civilians have been killed in a rare Russian attack on the Black Sea port of Odessa. We'll have the latest from Kiev. And thousands gather outside the Duomo Cathedral in Milan for the funeral of the former Italian Prime Minister, Silvio Berlusconi. Well, just to bring you some breaking news coming into us on our top story, that stabbing in Nottingham that happened early on Tuesday morning. The police have updated us with a sequence of the events that they say led up to the man killing 3 people with a knife and then using a vehicle to attack 3 others. According to police, detectives have spent countless hours piecing together the movements that led to 3 people losing their lives, which includes extensive CCTV coverage and eyewitness accounts. It's known that the man attacked 2 University of Nottingham students with a knife on Ilkeston Road on Tuesday the 13th of June. A call was then made to police at 4:04 a.m. Police quickly attended and found a male and female student aged 19 in the street unresponsive. Police seen on Ilkeston Road. Well, investigations have then revealed that a man matching the description of the suspect had attempted to gain entry to a supported living complex in Mapperley Road, but had been denied entry. The incident was not reported to the police at that time. Police believe the suspect has then attacked a man and stolen his van. A call was received by a member of the public, and upon police attendance, he was found deceased on Magdala Road with knife injuries. The stolen van was then used by the suspect to run over 3 members of the public in the Milton Street area. We know that 1 man is in hospital in a critical condition, while others are believed to have suffered minor injuries. A short while later, police managed to detain the suspect by using a taser when he abandoned the vehicle and approached officers with a knife. All 3 victims' families are being supported by specially trained officers. Detectives are keeping an open mind on the motives of the attack, and a 31-year-old man is still in police custody. He has been arrested on suspicion of murder. There have been reports suggesting that police are no longer working with counter-terrorism policing. This is not the case, and counter-terrorism policing continues to work alongside Nottinghamshire Police. There have also been reports that other calls were made to Nottinghamshire Police about the suspect before he carried out the attacks in Ilkeston Road. This is not the case. Chief Constable Kate Maynell has said, "First and foremost, my thoughts are with all the families affected by this shocking series of events. It's unimaginable to understand what they are going through. I'm very aware of the impact that these horrendous crimes will have had not only on Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, but also across the whole country. I am determined that we will work with community members, students from both universities and others impacted to reassure and support them. It's important that as a city, we stand together. I would like to thank the public for their response to these tragic events. We've received a high number of calls with people offering information and support." So that is the latest statement from Nottinghamshire Police about that fatal stabbing of 3 people and the running over of another 3 people in Nottingham city centre. As always, you can go to our website and the BBC's live page. There we have all the very latest on this developing story, including, as you can see there, the statement that I've just read out to you, which gives you a much clearer indication of the timings of the events as they unfolded. Well, we'll leave that story for now and bring you to some economic news, because here in the UK, the latest monthly economic growth figures show the country's economy grew by a modest 0.2% in April. This latest data, though, comes against the backdrop of an ongoing cost of living crisis and, of course, rising interest rates. Well, yesterday, the head of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, said the rate of inflation may take a lot longer than expected to come down, in a sign the central bank is likely to raise interest rates next week. More now from our correspondent, Darshini David.
If a doctor were to look at the UK as a patient, what would be its diagnosis? Probably the UK overall state of health sluggish, not much going on at all. The good news is the UK, unlike the EU, escaped that risk of a recession over the winter months. On the other hand, even though things aren't quite as bad as feared, the economy's been more resilient in the UK. Things aren't looking bright at all. And we look at the reasons why. Well, you mentioned a little bit earlier that stubborn, persistent inflation. It looks like the UK has got perhaps one of the worst bouts when it comes to the richest countries of persistent inflation that is hammering households and businesses' finances. And at the same time, businesses aren't investing. So overall, we're looking at a pretty weak picture right now, not the kind of thing any government wants to see.
Let's talk about gilts, government debt. What's going on there in that market? Because there has been talk, hasn't there, that what they're telling us that things are not looking great for the future.
Indeed, gilts, government bonds, that's the rate of interest the government has to pay to borrow via the financial markets. And they're an indication of where markets think interest rates might head in the coming months and years. And what's interesting, Mariam, is that when we look at those kind of rates, what we're seeing is a picture that's very reminiscent of what happened last autumn in the UK. When you might remember, we saw Liz Truss taking Downing Street as Prime Minister for a short period of time when the financial markets were very worried about the kind of tax-cutting plans that her government unveiled and how those could be funded and the risks to the economy around that. What we're looking at now is similar kinds of rates on those, but it's a very different underlying picture, because what's going on here is an underlying picture about the cost pressures that have pushed inflation up in the UK, that's keeping inflation high. And that is why traders, investors in this country think that interest rates are going to have to go up faster and further, perhaps, than previously thought, and they're going to have to stay high for longer. And why does this matter? It's because those kind of rates influence what happens to mortgage rates for households, and those kind of rates have been shooting up. It's going to real misery for over 3 million households in the UK this year.
Darshini, let's talk about the future. Some people are predicting that interest rates won't come down imminently, at least by the end of the year. Other people are saying we're looking at a recession for 2024. What are the predictions?
It's a really murky picture, as you say, Mariam, because there has been a real concern in the UK that the Bank of England has been slow to act. And that is why inflation here is higher than in the EU, than in the US on average, for example, and it's going to be more persistent. But it's very easy when you're raising interest rates to go too far. And that means that you'll see too much of a hard landing, a slowdown in the UK economy. And that's why people are talking about heightened risk of recession come 2024, 2025. As it stands at the moment, households in the UK are seeing their incomes, once you take away price changes, if you take away tax changes, they're seeing the fastest fall in living standards for decades at the moment. For many, it already feels like a recession. The message is things could get worse before they could get better.
At least 78 migrants are now known to have drowned after their fishing vessel capsized off the coast of southern Greece. Around 100 others were rescued. The boat is reported to have been heading to Italy from the Libyan port of Tobruk when it began taking on water late on Tuesday. The Greek Coast Guard says an extensive search operation was complicated by very strong winds. Officials in western Nigeria say at least 150 people are feared to have drowned after their boat capsized. Search and rescue efforts are underway in the state of Kwara. The vessel, with more than 300 passengers on board, sank in the River Niger on Monday. The passengers were returning from a wedding party in neighbouring Niger State. Well, our correspondent Chris Iwoko has been following the story from Nigeria's capital, Abuja.
At the moment, we have divers still in the waters searching for possible bodies, and emergency officials are also spread at the shores of the River Niger up to several kilometers, trying to see if among the passengers some have managed to escape. Basically, it is still not clear what caused the accident, but many people are suggesting that the vessel used could have been overloaded, and then it's also quite rickety. But laws that regulate inland transportation in Nigeria are not effective enough to try to regulate them effectively. Now, River Niger is a very large river, and it runs through the country, the middle of the country. Is a big means of transportation and trade for communities that live in the shores or a little bit down the hinterland, crossing to each other's communities to trade. And this particular time, these travelers were coming from a wedding party, and it was a night journey. And unfortunately, something happened and the boat capsized, and several people, more than 100, are declared dead, and
Chris.
Several others are still missing.
That was Chris Iwoko there from Abuja. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News.
"4:55 on the morning of February the 24th, I found myself at the heart of war. President Putin has announced what he calls a special military operation. As journalists, we will never truly understand what it feels like to have your home destroyed. But the next best thing is for us to find those people and bear witness to what they have gone through. There are endless moments when this war feels pointless, and this is one of them. There are so many human tales of survival and recovery. An undeniable moment, President Zelensky appearing in the heart of Kherson. Many predicted Russian troops would be wandering Kiev within days. Ukraine's defense has been both surprising and extraordinary. Sadly, this war is still happening, and we will continue to tell the story of the conflict in Ukraine.
You're live with BBC News. Iran is increasing pressure on actresses who refuse to wear compulsory hijab. This week, authorities summoned at least 4 more actresses for taking off their headscarves in public. It comes after a number of celebrities have defied rules on hair coverings in support for mass anti-government protests last year, which began after the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, who was detained for allegedly wearing her hijab improperly. Well, a new law has been drafted to ensure compliance with the dress code, but reports suggest more Iranian women are showing their hair in public. And I'm very pleased to say that with me now is Oscar-nominated Iranian-American actress Shohreh Aghdashloo. She won critical acclaim for her role in the 2003 film The House of Sand and Fog, and has also starred in the TV series 24 and Homeland. And you've been a vocal supporter, haven't you, of the Iran protests, Shohreh? I'm so happy to have you on the programme and to be able to talk to you face to face, because I wanted to ask you, you live a life as an actress, obviously, with freedom in the West. Life now as an actress within Iran has become so difficult and so pressured, hasn't it?
Oh my God, absolutely. First off, thank you so much for having me. It's devastating what's happening to the Iranian actresses, especially actresses in Iran, regarding hijab, regarding backing up the protesters, the peaceful protesters who are basically fighting barehandedly for their basic rights, human rights. It's just devastating. But in comparison to the human rights violation in Iran, hijab is the least of the problems that the people of Iran are facing with right now. But obviously the regime would like to hang on to the hijab because to cover up all the other atrocities that are taking place in Iran. It's just devastating. It's unbelievable. And the fact that the heads of the other states who could be beneficial, who could help the people of Iran, have chosen not to and turn the eye on what is happening in Iran. I guess the smell of cheap oil and other resources are far more stronger than the smell of blood that has been spread on the streets of Iran.
Let's talk about women and actresses in particular, because why do you think it is that Iranian authorities are targeting actresses and celebrities in this way? Is it trying to prove a point here, do you think? Are they easy targets?
Yes, absolutely. Not just because they are easy targets, because they are pretty well known, but they are the role models of all the youngsters that are following them by punishing one, by condemning one, by sending one to the prison, trying to defame the character of the actress or the actor that they're sending to jail, receiving lashes. Obviously, they're trying to break these people, break these role models, and therefore they think it would be a great lesson to all the ones that are following these heroes, their heroes.
Shohreh, you left Iran during the revolution of 1979. How does it make you feel when you see what is happening now? Because for me, at least, it feels very different to protests we've seen in the past.
I cannot believe it. There are times that I just sit down and start crying when Kian Pirfalak, a 10-year-old, has been shot and dead, and his mother is trying to keep his body cold, asking for ice from the neighbors. She brings his body home and goes door to door to gather ice so she can keep the body of her 10-year-old son live and fresh until morning, until they go to the to bury him.
These are horrendous stories. There are horrended stories coming out of the country.
But on the other hand, when you see the United Nations appoints the regime, or the so-called, they call it Iran, to the leadership of the UN Human Rights Council, you wonder what is happening here. Can't you see what is happening in Iran? Can't you see how many young people have been killed, have been tortured, have been raped? And the irony is that the entrance gate, I'm sure you know that the entrance gate of the UN is decorated by one of the well-known Persian poets, Sa'di, 13th century poet. It says, all the sons of Adam are one body, they are each other's limb, to say, for they are made of the same clay. When one limb should be in trouble, the others cannot remain at rest. Careless of people's suffering, deserve not the name human being.
So you don't believe the UN is living up to what it's supposed to be doing, to its charter?
To me, it's the utmost hypocrisy that I could have imagined in my life.
What do you want to see happen now?
I want the people, the heads of the states, who are benefiting the chaos in Iran right now, I want them to give it a second thought, change their mind, and try to help the people of Iran, not enable this regime to go further than what it has gone so far.
Okay, well, Shohreh, it's been really good to get you on the programme. Thank you once again for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come and speak to us on the BBC. Thank you.
I cannot thank you enough for having me. Merci.
Now let's move on and talk a little bit about a health story that's making headlines here in the UK. Research has found that most women with early breast cancer now beat the disease thanks to major improvements in treatments. Analysis by the British Medical Journal, the BMJ, showed the risk of dying within 5 years of diagnosis is now at around 5%. That's down from 14% in the 1990s. With more on that, I'm now joined by our medical editor, Fergus Walsh. And Fergus, give us a bit of an update on exactly what the BMJ have said today.
So this was a study in England, but of course breast cancer is a global problem. Over 2 million patients a year, the vast majority of those women globally are diagnosed with breast cancer. Most of those will be with early invasive breast cancer where it hasn't spread to the rest of the body. And this study from Oxford University tracked about 500,000 women in England over several years. And for those diagnosed in the 1990s, there was a 14% chance of dying within 5 years. But for those diagnosed from 2010, that had fallen to a 5% risk of dying. Now, all of those women had either mastectomies or breast conserving surgery. And so the question then is why are there been those improvements in England? And it's due researchers at Cancer Research UK who funded the study say a combination of things: better targeted therapies, new drugs, a better use of radiotherapy, new forms of chemotherapy, hormone treatment, and crucially, better awareness of symptoms among the public, because it's absolutely crucial. The earlier you diagnose any cancer, the better the likely outcome.
Fergus, thank you very much indeed. Fergus Walsh, our medical editor, with all the latest on what is a good news story for many women who are diagnosed with breast cancer. Now, before we go, I want to take you live to Milan because, as you can see, it's a beautiful day in the northern Italian city. And these people, some of them trying to protect their faces from the sun, waving at the cameras, are amongst the thousands of well-wishers, of people who have travelled from far and wide, from across the country, and I'm sure from elsewhere potentially, to be a part of the state funeral of the former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi. He is going to be afforded a state funeral. The Archbishop of Milan will lead the funeral in the city's Duomo, the Grand Cathedral, and you can see there it's an absolutely beautiful part of the city. The country is in mourning. Its flags are flying at half-mast, up and down on all public buildings. And this kind of tribute is pretty unprecedented for a former Prime Minister. State funeral is usually in Italy reserved for popes, war heroes or serving ministers. There you can see the front of the funeral cortege, which is speeded up a little bit compared to what I was seeing earlier, on its way to the Duomo. Of course, we will be covering this throughout the afternoon here on the BBC. So, as always, I urge you, don't go anywhere. Stay with us on the BBC.